This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. Gladiator 2 is now streaming on Paramount Plus. Rated R. Years after the death of Maximus, Lucius is forced into the Colosseum after his home is conquered by tyrannical twin Roman emperors. With the future of the empire at stake, he must find strength and honor to return the glory of Rome to its people. Gladiator 2, now streaming on ParamountPlus.com.
I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
Chris is in the ether today.
I'm just out there in space, wondering what's happening.
Wondering where we are because it's snowing outside, and we're all scared.
It's very peculiar. Savannah does not see snow often.
No.
If ever.
Yeah, JT measured it up against our fence and said it was like 4 inches.
4 inches. It was crazy. Yeah, so basically today it's been quite unprecedented. It was a lot more snow than I remember from like 7 years ago when it did it. And the roads are insane. So Chris is joining us via Zoom for safety reasons. We did not want him to die. We have enough ghosts here.
Mm-hmm.
Although I would totally come and haunt you guys.
Just now. If you didn't.
When I die, I'm coming.
Yeah, you freaking better.
Leave my microphone on.
And Absolutely. I'll be there.
What's your word, Chris? When you die, what's the word you're going to be throwing at us through the spirit box?
Sasquatch.
That's exactly. I would be like, it's Chris. Like the moment I heard Sasquatch, even if he didn't say that.
So true.
Heard that. Yeah. So we went, we got on the road, and it's not a long drive, but my God, it felt long. It felt long. It was 5 miles per hour. Everything is ice because everything rained before it snowed. It rained before it snowed. So it was just insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
then the snow on top of our car slowly would slide down as we were driving, and it was a very chaotic time.
I got out on Liberty twice. Let's just put it that way, y'all. But we made it.
Yeah.
We made it.
Nonetheless, we are here today, and we are going to be talking about the LaLaurie House of New Orleans, a cult classic, if you will. And the kind of idea that we're thinking with this is we've already announced to y'all that we're going to be doing Ghosts, which is basically a mobile podcast studio that we can take to these haunted locations. And so we thought it would be a fun idea to cover different locations that we plan to go to. Now, I will clarify with the LaLaurie House, you can't go into it currently unless something changes in the next few years. But New Orleans is definitely on our list, and this is by some standards and various opinions, one of the more haunted properties in New Orleans. And so...
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to be doing that, but we're also going to do a little cross-pollinating here of podcasts. As some of you might know, JT and I do a little spin-off true crime podcast called From One to Wicked, where we basically take different crimes and criminals and all those fun things, and we rank them on a scale of from 1 to wicked based off of 5 different categories. I'm Madison Timmons.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And we're the co-creators of the hit podcast, The Most Haunted City on Earth.
Look, we love ghosts, but we also love true crime. So we here at Haunted City Studios decided to create From One to Wicked,
a true crime podcast with a killer twist. We'll investigate,
discuss,
then rate
the most brutal and devious crimes and the monsters who commit them
on a scale from 1 to wicked. So sit back and kill some time with us.
And remember, next time you're walking down the street,
you might just be passing a perfect wicked 10. And those categories include brutality, premeditation, motive, difficulty of investigation, and body count. And so that is what we're going to be doing today, because not only is this a ghost story, it definitely has elements of true crime to it, which we felt like would be a fun idea to be doing. So
Let's do it.
And this is diet true crime, by the way. If you want the really gory stuff, unfiltered, go check out From One to Wicked. But let's get into it.
All right.
So, the LaLaurie house, standing on the corner of Royal and Governor Nichols Streets, is an infamous 3-story antebellum estate that has captured millions of tourists, film crews, and even Hollywood actors' attention. The Empire-style mansion is located at 1140 Royal Street in New Orleans and was originally the home of Delphine LaLaurie and renowned as one of the most haunted properties in the city.
So the LaLaurie Mansion is located in the French Quarter. Most people probably know of this place because of American Horror Story. A season they did a few years back was based about, around Madame LaLaurie and her house and the things she did. By all accounts, you could probably argue that in real life, Madame LaLaurie most likely was the first female serial killer in America. A lot of people died at that house, and it's, theorized that it was at the hands of Madame LaLaurie.
The mansion holds a dark history, as the former residence of the wealthy socialite was infamous, if you will, for an alleged torture of enslaved people within its walls. Oh, yeah. It's a dark one today, y'all.
Oh, yeah.
But since its creation in 1831, the LaLaurie Mansion has undergone numerous transformations, continually finding new purposes in the heart of the French Quarter. And this iconic residence stands as a premier attraction in city tourism, a big spot for visitors to visit just from outside of it, since we can't go inside currently, and all over the world who are eager to immerse themselves in the rich folklore of New Orleans. And notably, the mansion briefly belonged to the renowned Oscar-winning actor Nick Cage.
It's true.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that before he unfortunately lost it to foreclosure in 2009. But the history of the property has definitely been sinister and has inspired film and TV, including the 3rd season of the horror drama television show American Horror Stories.
The New Orleans Preservation Foundation is proud to present the haunted home tour of the notorious Madame LaLaurie. This very house, the center of New Orleans high society, was also a place of abject horror. No. Excuse me, you can't just barge in on the tour without purchasing a ticket.
You're giving us a tour for free.
Free, of course. The Code Noir, a decree that dictated the conditions of slavery, did not exist on these grounds. It was replaced by the Madame's own code of terror. And the torture she inflicted on her slaves would spawn 179 years of hauntings.
And so recently it is owned and was bought by a Houston-based energy trader, Michael Whalen, and is now back on the market for $10.25 million. So
if anybody out there listening has some spare change, it's a great place. It's a great location.
Fantastic. You get some ghosts, you get some gore, you get to spend a lot of money, if you will.
You get to sleep where Nick Cage slept. I mean, that in itself's got to be worth at least $5 million.
It has to be, at least. But yeah, now that we kind of got the brief overview going, let's talk a little bit about Madame LaLaurie. So Marie Delphine McCarthy was born on March 19th, 1787, on a very large plantation in the Upper Ninth Ward neighborhood, now known as Bywater, and came from a wealthy and aristocratic family. Her grandfather, a distinguished member of the French Royal Navy, managed this plantation, which was a major producer of cotton, sugar, and indigo. And so before she became the infamous Madame, her first marriage was to a man named Raymond Lopez y Angula de la Candelaria, and the intendant of Louisiana. And she was barely 14 years old when Lopez y Angula was well into his 30s when they got married. So after first being fired and returning to Spain for failing to obtain permission from the Spanish courts to marry her, Lopez and Marie returned to New Orleans in 1802. It was reported that he had passed away in Havana, and while some believe she murdered him, that appears not very likely. There's really no documentation for that. I think it's just a fun story because she had murderous antics. So the report mentioned that their ship ran aground and he succumbed to complications arising from a heart attack. So just a bad circumstance all around. But Marie returned to New Orleans and remarried twice and eventually had 7 children. She married Jean Blanc, a French merchant and slave trader who, shortly after Lopez's death, collaborated with the renowned pirate Jean Lafitte. And so Marie's mother passed away a few months before their wedding, and in today's money, her inheritance and subsequent wedding gifts from her father, which included property and slaves, would amount to over $2 million. So they were rich back then. But after his death in 1815, her husband's death, the second one, likely due to excessive time spent at the renowned and nearby Lafitte's blacksmith bar, she remarried in 1828 to Leonard Louis Nicolas LaLaurie. And
say that 5 times fast.
Boy, these people we gotta trim down these names a little bit for my sake, but nonetheless. So she married for the 3rd time to LaLaurie, and he was a physician who was also half her age. So she was like Una reverse this time. Madame Delphine LaLaurie became a wealthy New Orleans socialite and notorious enslaver and resided in a neoclassical mansion at the intersection of Royal and Governor Nichols Streets with her 3rd husband, Dr. Leonard Louis Nicolas LaLaurie. Now, when Louis LaLaurie arrived in New Orleans in 1825, he was a medical upstart eager to establish himself in a city that really needed some medical expertise, so he came at a good time. Specializing in an outdated form of chiropractic medicine, he set out to make a name for himself and was soon introduced to Madame Blanc through her ailing daughter. Letters from LaLaurie to his family in Villeneuve, France, I guess is more likely how that's pronounced, described treating Mademoiselle Blanc, the hunchbacked young lady. So apparently she was uggo also. So not only was she mean, she was hunchbacked, apparently. Similar letters from LaLaurie's father encouraged the young doctor, only 23, to nestle himself into the life of the wealthy. Established in nearly 40 years old, Madame Marie Delphine Blanc, the two fell in love and had their first child, Jean-Louis LaLaurie, in August of 1827, and by January 1828, they were married. So at the time of their marriage, the newlywed Louis LaLaurie had only a modest $2,000 to his name and a mere pittance compared to Marie Delphine's vast wealth. And so this peculiar relationship generated unsettling tensions for the unfortunate residents residing near the couple. And Jean Bose, a manager of the neighboring Henry de Guillaume plantation, penned a series of letters to his boss detailing their tumultuous relationship. So I guess he was the town gossip of the neighborhood. Their relationship was characterized by frequent fights, separations, and eventual reconciliations, and the cycle persisted until their bitter end. And so in 1831, Madame Marie Delphine LaLaurie acquired 2 plots of land on 1140 Royal Street from Edward Dufaust in the French Quarter. These plots had previously belonged to the Ursuline nuns, and while she hosted many lavish parties at her mansion over the years, disturbing reports surfaced about her appalling mistreatment of enslaved people. And that's when things start to turn for her. And she starts to get into some legal troubles. So Marie Delphine LaLaurie was brought to court 3 times before she gained international notoriety for her crimes against her slaves. Louisiana had been adhering to Code Noir since the first slave ship arrived in 1719, and beyond the obvious practice of imprisonment, the law prohibited abuse and cruelty towards enslaved individuals. However, the Madame's lingering inhibitions remained unheeded. The same letters from Jean Bose to Henri d'Este-Guillaume recounted an incident in 1828 when authorities finally arrived at their home and seized their slaves in a state of bloodshed.
Wow.
In 1829, Bose, a former pirate in Jean Lafitte's crew, wrote to his boss about the indulgent jury that had acquitted LaLaurie of similar charges. You know, money talks. That's more than likely how that went down. Yeah. But
oh, absolutely.
In 1832, Bose continued his critique, detailing how the abusive madam had simply bribed her way out of court. Records of these court cases have mysteriously disappeared, with some speculating that her descendants, who sought to clear her name many decades later, were responsible for their banishment.
Oh, yeah, I bet they burned them bad boys.
Oh, 100%. But historian Carolyn Marrow Long, and also the author of Madame LaLaurie, Mistress of the Haunted House, suggests that Madame LaLaurie was first investigated in 1829 for those cruelties towards enslaved people. And a document dated 1829, signed by John Randolph Grimes, LaLaurie's neighbor and highly esteemed lawyer in New Orleans, serves as the only legal evidence of the heinous acts committed by the infamous Madame LaLaurie. And so the document states, received as Madame LaLaurie $300 for my fee in defending the prosecution of the state against her in the criminal court. Although court records related to this investigation have not been discovered, there is evidence indicating that Madame LaLaurie compensated for legal services and sold several enslaved individuals after the investigation. And Louis and Marie in 1832 took a small step towards an entire divorce by filing for a separation of room and board. However, despite their tumultuous relationship, they maintained appearances by hosting extravagant parties. Despite this reputation that they had accrued, many still yearned for an invitation to their home. And Madame LaLaurie is believed to have tortured, mutilated, and murdered an estimated total of 57 of her slaves in New Orleans during the early 19th century.
Whoa.
But people still wanted to get to that party, so
jeez.
It's just wild.
She's like a full-blown serial killer.
She really is. She really is.
Oh, my God.
And really where that came to light was the fire. That really just ripped all the curtains back, you know? And so on April 10th, 1834, a horrific fire engulfed the LaLaurie Mansion. And as the flames went on, a group of onlookers gathered outside the burning building, because what else was there to do in 1834 but be nosy? And so, as reported by, according to the New Orleans Bee, which is the city's French language newspaper, several individuals approached the home requesting the keys to enter, but were met with a gross and insulting rejection. She wasn't giving anybody those keys because she had something to hide. The nameless reporter of this story failed to specify whether it was LaLaurie or her husband who stubbornly refused to relinquish the keys, but Judge Jacques-Francois Connage, a close friend of the LaLauries, was among the first responders to the fire and promptly recognized that the bondspeople were still trapped inside, which is just kind of a weird way to describe your enslaved people is bondspeople, but, you know, nonetheless.
Bondspeople.
The
so
bondspeople.
Like, why would they?
Because they were property.
Because
and
they
so
were, it's a bond?
Yeah, so I'm assuming
wow.
you could probably post, you know, their, you know, your title to them as bond. It's more than likely what that means, but I've never heard anybody describe it as that. But nonetheless. So he demanded that Louis LaLaurie remove his slaves from the fire. However, Dr. LaLaurie's response was rather curt. And the direct quote is, "There are those who would be better employed if they would attend to their own affairs instead of officially intermeddling with the concerns of other people." So that is the ritzy old way of saying, mind your business. So meanwhile, many noticed that the madam was growing increasingly anxious as the flames drew closer to their second-story outhouse in the service quarters. Judge Connage had no idea what awaited him when he summoned anyone willing to rescue the enslaved people still trapped within the house. Many neighbors were either aware or suspicious that the upper floor was being used as a prison of sorts, and some alleged that she would invite special guests to witness their torture chamber during parties. Which I'm like, I don't even know how that conversation starts. It's like, hey, you want to see what I got upstairs? It's like, no, I don't want to see what you have upstairs if you're acting like that. That's weird.
No, it's crazy.
There's a lot of ice breaking going on, a lot of small talk, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
when the brandy
I've cut my finger. Blood doesn't disturb you, does it? Okay.
When the brandy starts getting to them, then they're feeling a little bit more frisky. But yes, so some alleged that she would invite these people up during parties, while others claimed that she would beat her daughters if they were caught feeding her victims.
Oh my God.
However, the truth would soon be revealed, if you will. Firefighters made a chilling discovery inside: 7 slaves horribly mutilated, trapped in the burning building. The Bee went on to condemn the barbarous and fiendish atrocities committed by LaLaurie against her enslaved victims. And the firefighters bravely rescued these people and brought them to the Cabildo, the city jail, if you will, to be treated for their wounds. Upon entering the house, they were horrified to witness these slaves, or so it seemed, in a state of extreme mutilation, suspended by their neck, with their limbs apparently torn and stretched from one extremity to the other, as the reporter recounted.
Oh, I didn't know it was like this now.
Oh, it's like this. It's bad.
I didn't know it was like this. I was like, that reminds me of the wife of Bathory.
Yes, it definitely does feel that way.
That's crazy.
I know. It is. And honestly, I'm so glad that somebody documented it, because otherwise...
Yeah, they were trying to cover it up.
Exactly. And the story added that the victims had been merely kept in existence to prolong their sufferings and to make them taste all that the most refined cruelty could inflict. And there are numerous legends surrounding the mutilated bodies that were discovered amidst the engulfment of the LaLaurie Mansion. Stories about a woman whose body was twisted into the shape of a crab.
What?
That's how it was written, that it was described to look like a crab. So I'm
like her legs are
right,
like behind her head, maybe off to the side. And
there are certain torture devices that, you know, reorganize the body by breaking limbs, and various forms of the rack will change the shape of the body. So yeah, humans suck.
Humans suck. That's a great way to put it. And she definitely sucked.
I would like to just add that for anyone listening, if you go to what's the city down there? It's right
St. Augustine.
St. Augustine.
Mm-hmm.
St. Augustine. You already know where I'm going with this. If you ever go to St. Augustine and go to the Torture Museum, Chris designed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And if you get the audio tour, you'll hear my voice.
We got it.
Yes,
I was definitely doing that, and the same for the Chicago Torture Museum, same company.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It is very cool.
I went up to the guy behind the counter. And I was like, "Yeah, we kind of know that guy. Like, he's like our best friend. It's cool. It's whatever." And the guy was like, "Cool. It's gonna be $20."
Literally,
like, okay.
Literally though. But yeah. So she definitely had her fair share of torture, if you will. So you had the crab lady, and then others had supposedly their mouths sewn shut. And there was a woman chained to the kitchen stove that was one of the first rounds of people that were found during the fire. And so, yeah. Upon being discovered, the elderly woman declared in broken French that she had started the fire as an alternative to being sent to the outhouse. So I think she was trying to, be like, hey, we're up here, help us.
No, I mean, that's super smart. And honestly, last-ditch effort. That's brutal. I mean, no one needs to ever go through something like that. That's crazy.
Right. And then supposedly 2 bodies were sticking out of the ground beneath where the search party was. Wow. And so one man had a large hole in his head, his body covered from head to toe with scars and filled with worms. So she put them under the floorboards when she was done.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And many were chained up with large spiked collars and suspended by the neck with their limbs, like we said earlier, stretched out and torn from one extremity to the other. Mutilated corpses were found scattered around them. Many newspapers refrained from delving deeper into the atrocities committed by the LaLauries, probably because they were the elite, but nonetheless. Now, there was kind of an air of mystery to all of this, though, because of Dr. LaLaurie's medical expertise and knowledge of human anatomy. So a lot of people started thinking that she would torture them, and when they were too far gone, he would mutilate them, essentially. Wow. But there's not really hard evidence of that. That's just kind of the local
It's like the like Nazi death camp doctor mutilation thing.
Yeah.
Dr. Mengele.
Yes,
that's who. Yep.
And so some other rumors of LaLaurie Mansion victims included a man with a stick shoved into his brain, a woman where she was nailed to the floor through her intestines, and that there were buckets of mutilated genitalia. Yeah, she's really awful. Like, she's really heinous.
This is like demonic.
Right.
This is not even a person.
No, she's an entity. Truly.
This is like pure sadism. Mm-hmm. Like, what?
I know. It really is. It really is just like
I didn't know
mind-boggling.
about this. Mm-hmm. This is crazy.
And so as news of the LaLaurie's heinous acts came to light, the residents of New Orleans were filled with outrage, as you would imagine. And so according to the Bee, a massive crowd of approximately 4,000 people gathered at the city jail. In a display of collective anger, the neighbors ransacked the LaLaurie's mansion.
Wow.
And by the end of April 12th, the mansion was reduced to a crumbled pile of bricks with all of their expensive personal belongings smashed to pieces.
Okay.
So
you know it's bad when, like, in the deep South in that time,
people
were pissed off about how the slaves were being treated. That was bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And tensions rose to incredible amounts as Madame LaLaurie and 4 of her children escaped the charred home through the carriage entrance. And LaLaurie's favorite servant, Bastien, guided their getaway carriage past the enraged mob. And he swiftly took them up Bayou Road to Lake Pontchartrain. And from there, they embarked on a journey to Mobile, New York, and eventually to Paris. And despite his efforts, Bastien was never freed from his servitude. And so it is widely acknowledged that he was favored to act as a spy among the enslaved people. And investigations into the home after the fire revealed multiple graves in the courtyard containing the remains of her victims. Wow. And so even later renovations uncovered skeletons beneath the floorboards.
Stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yo.
I know.
No wonder everyone talks about this.
It emanates.
Oh yeah, no,
you know.
It's awful. Just
like the worst I think I've heard.
It really is, and that's I think why the story has lasted so long.
Yeah.
You know, because that level of torment and cruelty, I feel like, doesn't leave a home in that way.
Yeah, Applejack said, commented, "I'm just wondering how no one noticed." And I'm like over here thinking the same thing. Like, with all the screams and all of that, like how did people not notice that?
I think so. Like, it's said that some people knew and some people had their suspicions, but it's even like this today. You know, when wealthy elites do heinous things, a lot of times people will turn a blind eye to it. You know, because they are afraid of that person who has power and they don't want to be outcast or shunned from society for vocalizing against something that they might not have hard evidence against.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just didn't have a great enough conscience to think it was wrong at the time.
There probably was a level of abuse that was acceptable, and they were not thinking that she had exceeded that level of abuse.
Right.
You know, it's so bizarre to have like you said, a moment at which this atrocious and horrifying practice of slavery has this, groundswell of, hey, you can't treat them like that. It's like,
right.
The slavery is pretty bad. The slavery on its own, very, very bad. So, to think that there are people who are like, well, that's too far. That says a lot. That speaks volumes.
It really does.
Now, Alex is a longtime parajunkie, a native of NOLA, and I got a question. She's on the live chat right now, but I know you've been by it. Do you ever feel anything or get anything from it? Just just even walking by it or looking at it or being near that level of atrocity,
right?
Or past atrocity, I'd say. Because when I went to, the most evil place I've ever been is Dachau, and I'm not very sensitive at all. And it just was the worst feeling being there. It was just terrifying.
I mean, how could you not feel horrible being there? But yeah, Alex, let us know. So kind of wrapping up Madame LaLaurie's life, if you will. So after a long illness, Madame LaLaurie passed away in December 7th, 1849 in Paris, and was laid to rest originally at Cemetery of Montmartre.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
I wasn't expecting that to happen, and that jarred me so bad.
Chris, I don't know if you
What
heard
happened?
that. No, Chris probably didn't.
It was applause.
I don't know what happened.
I struck an applause because she died.
Oh,
And it just burst into my eardrums, and I was
sure.
not prepared for that whatsoever. But yeah, applaud.
Yeah.
Now, in 1851, though, her children honored her final wish, like that woman deserved any level of a final wish, by exhuming her remains and returning them to New Orleans. And so she is now interred at St. Louis number 1 Cemetery in New Orleans in the Blanc family tomb, which her son Paulin Blanc had purchased some years earlier. And although there are no official records of her internment, it's likely that this is where she rests today, as it would have been difficult to vandalize the tomb. Mm-hmm. And the first official record of the tomb being used was for her granddaughter in 1884. So Madame LaLaurie, who briefly considered returning to New Orleans in 1842, spent the rest of her life living very lavishly in Paris, squandering money she didn't have.
I see.
So she,
there's even a lot of question as to whether she made it back. I think there's still debate on whether or not she was even entered, because I think there is a plaque at the grave that marks her death at 1842, which was like 7 years prior to the death on record.
right.
And it's one of those like, is she in there? Maybe she's in there. We don't know, because no one kept up with documents at the time.
Exactly. And especially if you're moving people around, I mean, they're not going to necessarily keep a whole record of that. But when she was living in Paris, her son-in-law, Augustin de Lassus, squandered her finances for his own gain and possibly as revenge for ruining the family name, basically. In a series of letters from Paulin to de Lassus reveals that she never felt remorse for her cruel actions and was almost completely unaware of them.
Oh, my Lord.
I know. Paulin states Madame LaLaurie had no idea about the reason for her departure from New Orleans. And Louis Léonard Nicolas LaLaurie, the doctor she was married to, abandoned his family in Paris a few years after their arrival. And he also met his demise in Havana, Cuba, on October 15th, 1862, and was laid to rest in Montmartre, Paris, with him any evidence of his involvement in the atrocities that occurred. But many believe that a curse was left behind when Madame LaLaurie made her exit all those years ago, that she left some kind of curse upon the property. It's called evil.
Yeah, I was about to say.
It's called...
Like she did the...
Just stained.
Right.
deep, terrible stains.
Exactly. And just for one quick little other account that just as an interesting little side bit about some of the history of the property, in a second volume of retrospect of Western travel published in 1838 by author Harriet Martineau, delved into the infamous case of Madame Delphine LaLaurie in the house fire that basically ruined her residence. And during her visit to New Orleans, Martineau encountered unnamed sources who expressed their suspicions about LaLaurie's treatment of her slaves. However, these locals refrained from further questioning her due to her outward appearance of charm, hospitality, and general perception of her as a perfect goodness, like every serial killer.
Yeah, exactly.
But Martineau mentioned that a neighbor whose identity was not disclosed witnessed LaLaurie wielding a whip as she allegedly pursued a child outside their house until they reached the highest point of the estate.
Wow.
And the neighbor covered her eyes just before the girl plummeted from the top of the house. After the child landed, Martineau described the scene as if every bone in her body was broken. I know. The book mentioned that the child's body was buried at the corner of the yard, and little did she know she might have witnessed the murder of Leah, who is supposedly the most prominent spirit on the property.
Oh, okay.
And regarding the 1884 fire, Martineau claimed that a slave tied to the stove ignited the blaze after uttering these chilling words, "They had better all be burned together than lead such a life." Martineau recounted the experience where people who entered LaLaurie's home discovered all of these mutilated slaves, and after being confronted by enraged crowds outside the home, the book stated that LaLaurie fled with absolutely no regard to the actual group that was protesting her. But now that all of that lovely, gruesome story is done, let's talk a little bit about the hauntings of the property. So, George Washington Cable, a prominent Southern writer of the 19th century, coined the term haunted mansion to refer to the mansion in his 1881 novelette, Madame Delphine. This concept was later incorporated into his collection of short stories titled Strange True Stories of Louisiana. Over the years, the house gained a reputation for being both cursed and haunted, and it laid in ruins for about 4 years. Many people avoided it by walking on the other side of the street, and most people still do today. And so...
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
People don't want to walk by that, and I don't blame them. And so there is also a rumor that a curse will follow anyone who even dares to touch the property. And there is, different experiences of phantom smells of rotting flesh, apparitions of enslaved people in chains, the spirit of a little girl named Leah, who we'll talk about in just a second, phantom hands choking people outside of the house.
Wow.
And some believe that the curse also will fall upon anyone who owns the house. And so, since LaLaurie fled town in 1834, the mansion had undergone various transformations. It had served as a private residence, a school, a music conservatory, low-income housing, a furniture store, and even a bar.
Wow.
And however, none of these ventures lasted long, which is interesting, succumbing to the reasons such as scandal, theft, even racism, giving rise to the infamous curse of the LaLaurie Mansion. And photos of the LaLaurie Mansion have captured different faces in the windows, orbs floating around the balcony, and some visitors have reported experiencing physical sickness while outside of the house. For instance, a woman and her daughter visited New Orleans and took 2 different ghost tours. On both occasions, the daughter felt unwell while standing across the street from the home.
Crazy.
And so a little bit about Leah, and there's not a ton on Leah, and I think it's mostly because of the fact that the home hasn't been investigated very much because it's been off limits to the public for so long. But one morning in 1833, after one of these extravagant parties that the LaLauries would have, the abusive tendencies of Madame LaLaurie were exposed to the neighborhood when an 8-year-old enslaved girl tragically fell from the roof of the LaLaurie Mansion and met her demise. Madame LaLaurie in a fit of rage, followed closely behind the girl with a whip. The girl, combing the Madame's elegant hair, caught a snag and enraged the woman to make her... Just think about that.
Yeah.
She's combing this woman's hair, and that was enough for her to be like, I need to chase this girl and beat her to death.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, she's like satanic.
Yeah.
Like, that's not surprising at all.
It's not. But yeah, so LaLaurie would chase the little girl around the house, whipping her mercilessly. And the chase culminated to the roof, where the terrified girl plummeted to her death. But her heinous crime was reported to the authorities, leading to the seizure of her slaves the first time. Mm-hmm. And she was found guilty of abusing 9 of them. But her insatiable violence knew no bounds, and her slaves were repurchased by family members and returned to the house through a series of deceptive maneuvers.
God.
I know. And although there are no official records of these events, there are letters from neighbors and other written documents that provide evidence of its occurrence. And one unfortunate woman who shared a wall with the infamous murderess heard the loud thud of a body hitting the ground during their argument. And another witness even saw a grave being dug in the courtyard around the alleged time of Leah's death. And city records also reveal that one of LaLaurie's teenage female slaves passed away around this time due to unknown causes. This incident marked the most shocking display of abuse witnessed in the LaLaurie household to the neighborhood at that point.
Okay.
But yes, so some of the experiences people have that are associated with Leah, neighbors report hearing terrible moans emanating from the ruins of the abandoned mansion before, almost immediately after the fires broke out. And the smoke-cleared whispers of these spirits, if you will, were said to reside within the mansion and began to spread. Her son-in-law, Placide Forstall, who was married to her first daughter, Marie Borgia Borquita Delphine Lopez y Angola de la Candelaria.
Wow.
Absolved her.
Bless you.
I know. Absolved her of her property in New Orleans shortly after her departure from the city, and subsequently sold the mansion and about 11 of the other 30 documented slaves owned at the time. And so what became of the other 19 remain unsettling. But in 1837, Forstall sold the house to Pierre E. Trestor. Trestor lived there for only 3 months, from March to July. And a lot of people believe that it was the spirits that ran him out.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when people encounter Leah, it is hearing footsteps. They see a little girl running through the halls. They hear screams. But a lot of that can, in my opinion, be associated to many of the tortured people who resided in this home. So,
absolutely.
Sure, it could just be a catch-all of what Leah is, but just because of the fact that there was documentation of a young girl that age being possibly killed on the property. But I think it's a combination of a lot of things.
Sure.
And so when it was a school, which is also so bizarre that they decided to do that.
What?
Yeah.
It was a school?
It was a girls' high school.
Oh, my God.
And
Can
so,
you imagine?
Right? Like, I can't.
As if you don't hate school enough. It's like, oh, I got to go back to that place.
Well, and listen to this, because it's even more out of pocket. So during the Reconstruction, the Lower Girls High School, one of the pioneering integrated schools in New Orleans, faced a significant challenge on December 14th, 1874. The irony was not lost on the students, as the curse, a legacy of racism, reared its ugly head alongside its old counterpart. The anti-integration group called the White Leaguers forcibly expelled black students from schools across New Orleans through well-organized violence. And the LaLaurie Mansion School was one of the first to be targeted and was part of a larger series of racial riots that engulfed the city. Shortly after reopening as an all-black girls' school, it managed to stay open for only a year. And in the early 1800s, an English teacher established a music and dancing conservatory at the mansion. However, his improper conduct with some of his students soon caught the attention of a local newspaper, leading to his downfall. The following day, the school closed due to a lack of students and funding.
I see.
So that's just really weird on the city for allowing that, knowing the history of the property, for opening a black children's school. It just feels kind of icky, in my opinion. But it is interesting to note, though, at least on the side of the theory of there being some sort of curse, that's why these places are, shutting down quickly, or it's attracting almost evil people as well.
Sure.
But the death of Jules Vigny was an interesting piece as well. One of the most peculiar victims of the curse was Jules Vigny, the son of a wealthy French family. Vigny, presumed dead since the Civil War, unexpectedly began living in the haunted mansion in secrecy for several years after the school closed. Oh. In 1892,
weird.
I know, it's really weird.
Super weird.
I mean, listen, sometimes you just want to hang out in a creepy mansion. But
Right.
in 1892, though, when...
I'm sure the rent is really low.
Right, exactly. But in 1892, when Barthélemy Bubé owned the mansion, Vigny was discovered dead in a tattered cot deep within its recesses. And,
wow.
Yeah. An avid antique collector, his expensive treasures remained hidden from those who walked outside the home. And a few $100s were found on his body, while $10,000 were concealed in his mattress. So he had money. He just wanted to live in this dilapidated, creepy, haunted mansion, I guess.
He may have known something. He might have been after something specific.
Right.
Like
Yeah, maybe.
experience-wise, or, because obviously he could have left. He just was bound and determined to stay.
And it killed him.
Maybe Delphine had her claws in him.
Very likely. She seems to have a penchant for turning people evil. But however, it was evident that whoever or whatever killed him was not interested in his wealth. Rumors of the hidden treasure concealed within the walls of the LaLaurie mansion circulated, but no one dared to venture inside. If that tells you anything about how afraid people are of this house, they're like, I don't care.
There's gold in the walls, but it's haunted.
They're like, that's fine, I'll pass. But also, the LaLaurie Mansion was the first haunted house in America, called the Haunted Saloon. And when I say like haunted house, we're not talking about like real ghosts. We're talking about like Halloween Horror Nights haunted house, which is just weird in itself. But yeah, and I'll send it to JT, but there's like a little newspaper clipping of the advertisement for the Haunted Saloon.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when was that again?
This was in the between the late 19th and early 20th century.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's just crazy.
What a weird place.
It's a really weird place.
And so when it got caught on fire, was it you said that it was reduced to rubble, and then they built it back up.
They did.
And like the exact same, like exactly how it was?
Yes, they completely restored
Well,
it.
actually, I think the fire only destroyed like a portion of it. It's when that mob of 4,000 showed up.
Right.
Oh.
And
they
just
showed
finished
up,
it off.
and they reduced it to rubble in their outrage. Yeah.
Okay.
As it should have been left, but nonetheless.
Right. And the weird thing is that they rebuilt it. And the weird thing is that they're like, we'll rebuild it to its former glory.
And that very well could have been the family too, because
I'm sure it was.
Yeah. But when it was acting as a haunted house, it was during the time when a wave of Sicilian immigrants settled in New Orleans, and the French Quarter underwent a transformation, becoming known as Little Palermo, and large buildings such as the LaLaurie Mansion were demolished and rebuilt as tenements. And so Fortunato Greco in 1893 purchased and renovated the house to offer these newcomers with affordable yet cramped living quarters. However, he soon started observing the large crowds gathering around the newly painted red doors and windows on the street, and these noisy onlookers weren't there to admire the cheaply renovated 40 rooms or gawk at the shattered crystal ball in the window. They were there for the same reasons we are today. And so, of course, Greco was seeing dollar signs at this point. He's like, I can monetize on the attraction to this home. And so he opened the Haunted Saloon on the first floor, charging a mere 10 cents per entry. Hoping to attract potential buyers, Greco embarked on a series of renovations. However, his efforts only revealed the dark secrets hidden beneath the mansion's floorboards, exposing the disturbing legacy of Madame LaLaurie. So, despite the upgrades, the converted mansion proved to be an unsuitable living environment for any tenant, with many experiencing terrifying encounters. One woman awoke in the middle of the night to a chilling sight. A woman dressed in luxurious 1800s attire hovering menacingly over her child. And another man was startled by the sounds of an enslaved person wrapped in chains yelling in his face. Moans of torment were also frequently heard emanating from the attic. And after serving as the haunted saloon from 1893 to 1916, the latter as a furniture store owned by Marcel Krauss from 1920 to 1923, the LaLaurie Mansion finally ceased to be used as a public space. And then it was transformed into the Warrington House, which was a shelter for homeless men from 1921 to 1932. So they're like, nobody should be in this place, but yet let's put the homeless men in this creepy house.
Yeah.
That seems fitting. It's just very weird choices to make for this place. But there is a little bit of a timeline that will include the different owners through the years who owned the property. And so over the years, the LaLaurie Mansion has been known by various names, including the Haunted Mansion, the Haunted House, and the Warrington House. Today, though, it is owned by Michael Whalen, and he is, like I said at the beginning, a Houstonian, and he's an energy trader and senior U.S. Department of Transportation advisor. And Whalen rarely stays at the mansion, preferring to come on holidays, and he often invites only lucky friends to stay the weekend.
Wow.
And since its purchase, the LaLaurie Mansion has been strictly closed to the public. And so, now, it is worth noting that while many owners, such as Dr. Harry Russell Albright, reported no paranormal activity, many seemingly fell under the curse. Frank Ochpinti, a cousin of the renowned New Orleans mob boss Carlo Marcello, found himself entangled in a federal loan scandal in 1974. And Dr. Harry Russell Albright, the skeptic, met with a tragic end in January 2005. A seemingly innocent gesture at the renowned French Quarter restaurant Galatoire's turned into a physical altercation. Albright, in a moment of jest, threw a mint onto the table of 28-year-old Tony Krem, a visiting Texas businessman, and this unexpected gift was met with hostility. Krem followed Albright onto Bourbon Street, escalating the situation by pushing the 69-year-old retired radiologist. Albright sustained a head injury, fell into a coma for 3 weeks, and required special medical care for the rest of his life.
Wow.
And I know. And so these isolated incidents raise questions about whether these were just mere coincidences or part of something more sinister and supernatural, like the curse. Exactly.
Curse. Ashley commented, said, I saw an article saying the mansion has been bought by the same company that owns the Lizzie Borden house.
I've heard that rumor too.
I recently heard that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think would be interesting and would really open it up for people to, actually go and witness the property and spend a little bit of time there. Which
it by far has the most potential because it has never been investigated.
Right. I completely agree. And just to kind of finish it up a little bit, here's some thoughts on the property from Nick Cage and from Whalen. So Cage and Whalen are the most recent owners of the LaLaurie Mansion. In a 2014 interview with Vanity Fair, Cage revealed that he had purchased the house in 2007 with the intention of writing an American horror novel there. However, he did not make any significant progress on this book. So... in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Whalen didn't share any experiences related to the home being haunted. He stated, though, I'm Catholic and such things don't scare me, which is a very Catholic thing to say. But the Journal also mentioned that when Whalen moved in, he had the LaLaurie Mansion blessed by a priest.
Oh, wow.
So apparently
precautionary.
Precautionary. They don't scare him, but just to make sure. So
it's like, I already got it taken care of.
Exactly. Michael
Got the
Whalen.
exterminators in. I got the exorcists in. Everything's fine. Don't worry
Everything's
about
covered. Yeah, we'll make sure it's marked that way. But Michael Whalen had the house renovated, though, in 2013 by fellow Houstonian and local New Orleans Katie Stassi Scott. And she mentioned feeling spooked on the second floor where the torture room was allegedly located. But neither she nor Whalen ever claimed to have witnessed anything. However, those who currently care for the house in Whalen's absence share a different account. Housekeeper Carol Williams has reported strange occurrences in the LaLaurie Mansion, including indented body shapes in mattresses that haven't been slept in for months. She also, I know, which is so creepy. I can't even imagine coming in to, like, you know, freshen up a house before somebody comes in and you're like, who's been laying here? But
Goldilocks?
Goldilocks? It's too firm. But
it's too firm. It's too firm. It's too firm. She didn't stay in any of these beds.
She didn't. But she also mentioned a faucet on the first floor that turns on by itself and a kitchen door that opens and closes randomly. And one Reddit user who recently worked as a house cleaner at the mansion shared their experience, and they only lasted a month due to the overwhelming smell of rotting flesh emanating from the second floor.
Wow.
Yeah. And on multiple occasions, they heard chains being dragged across the floor above them. And then one day she heard the sound of a girl screaming in heavy footsteps on the third floor, formerly the roof above her, which a lot of people attribute that to Leah.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she attempted to help what she thought was a person in distress, but found no one. The woman quit the next day. And so that is what we have on the LaLaurie Mansion. And
all right.
Hopefully one day we will get to investigate this property and maybe we'll be able to get some more information on it because a lot of it's such folklore nowadays, you know?
Yeah. So, as far as that rumor goes, that the Lizzie Borden people bought it, according to OnX, which is my hunting app.
Yeah.
It basically just gives you, like the elite version gives you names of who owns certain properties, so you can hit them up to hunt on their land. It is owned by Whale NOLA, like whale is in the animal, NOLA LLC, which is probably Michael Whalen.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we'll see.
So it's probably still owned by that person.
Yeah, so now we're going to dive into ranking Madame LaLaurie.
Yeah. All right. I already got my rankings. I'll start.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the fun part. All right. So brutality, I give her a 4. I'm playing now. 10. God. Absolute, like.
She definitely gets a 10.
10 would give her a 11 if I could. Premeditation, because, you know, premeditation's hard for a case like this. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna give her a 10 because basically it's, you know, she knew what she was doing and she bought, she paid for humans to torture them. So
she also paid for the implements to torture them with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So 10 for the premeditation, 10 for the motive because it is just pure sadism, and you know exactly what she wanted out of this, like, and why. You know, it's just the weirdest. It's crazy. Difficulty of investigation because she told everybody and all that. I'm giving her a 7 for that. No 10 there because I feel like this was going to come to a head no matter what.
Right.
And body count, I'm giving her a 10, which is hard to get on our true crime from 1 to Wicked. They don't get 10s very, but I don't think it's going to be 57. I think it's more. I think it's for sure more.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, absolutely. We only got the ones in the house that night. You know, it's like that's an any given night situation.
Right.
You know, at any given time, and then that's just because we can track like her buying and selling, but there's no telling that she only dealt with slaves.
Yeah. Right.
There's no telling that she wasn't taking in, you know, just, you know, like homeless or you know, preying on children. Lots of children deaths. So you're like, I think there's a good chance that this specific sickness of hers didn't restrain itself.
I completely agree with that.
Chris, do you want to give your ratings if you got them?
Well, and they're pretty much a mirror. Brutality, it doesn't get more brutal.
No, it doesn't.
Than,
Right.
Because one of the keys to this brand of brutality is that these are helpless people that you have complete power over, and this is what you choose to do with that power. It is full of such horror and terror and really, you just want to say, I can't fathom the machinations that allow you to do that to another human being. So brutality is definitely a 10. Premeditation, absolutely a 10. I think she at that point she was living for it. It wasn't just premeditation; it was preoccupation. She looked for any excuse to lord over and exude this power. And it's the classic serial killer motif. If the serial killer were just given carte blanche, and it's like, you know what?
Yes.
You're a serial killer, and we're not going to stop you. And it's just going to grow and grow and grow, and the appetite gets more and more and more. So it's premeditation, absolutely. Motive is the same. I think it is obvious that the motive is ingrained. She does not need a reason, because she is the reason. Who she is the reason she's doing it, and it doesn't. Her motive is that she delights and finds great joy in doing these terrible things. So it's like the difficulty of investigation is probably the only thing that raises the question, because she did flaunt it, and she did but the difficulty of investigation might also have to include whether or not they were able to pin it on her, because she was able to leave. She was a free woman. She wasn't incarcerated. She didn't suffer for her crime, which means that the evidence, whatever it was, no matter how damning, didn't sway anybody. So now the difficulty of investigation is about the time period, and it's about them not pursuing it with the appropriate, fervent nature that was necessary. Also, the fact that it took someone burning the house down to bring the evidence to light also suggests that the difficulty of investigation was high. It was high because people probably didn't care to investigate to its proper conclusion, and in almost infuriatingly so, she got away with it. And getting away with it, to me, definitely ranks the investigation difficulty higher, simply because they must have missed what they needed to pin it on her. So I'll go about a 9 on the difficulty of investigation. And the only reason I don't go to 10 is because it was discovered in her lifetime, that it was discovered. And, had it been something they discovered after her death, it would have been a 10. But the fact that it happened, that they discovered it in her lifetime, that's a 9. And it's so high because they didn't put her in jail, because the investigation did not lead to incarceration. And then body count in cases like this, even a low body count, because of the horror inflicted, still reigns high. Like if it were, only a few people that she really just tortured, mercilessly, it would probably still be a higher number to me. But I go 10 because I think you're right. I think there is no accounting for how many people might have died, because who knows what the records missed, or what she was able to cover up, or, because there's all these reports of bodies under the floor. There's Aaliyah is supposedly buried in an unmarked grave on the property. That means that there are deaths that are not disclosed, that there may be many more victims. And we are focusing on the LaLaurie era of her life, which was after a good long time of her roaming around. Who knows what she got up to before she married LaLaurie? Who knows what? Because being wealthy and being in the deep South, or just kind of like access to a ruralized community, you can get up to some real mischief with a coin. You could do some real horrible damage. And there was even speculation that she may have killed like one of her earlier husbands. And it's like, even that notion, the fact that it could exist suggests that, she could have killed a lot of people before she even, moved into her death mansion. So,
That's exactly it.
She definitely ranks with the worst of the worst.
Oh yeah.
I
because it requires it's not like telling other people to kill and being responsible in that way, because I think Elizabeth Bathory like had other people killing for her. Not good, still terrible and horrible, but I think that that Delphine got her hands dirty. And that makes her such a kind of a nightmarish character.
She really is. And honestly, I mean, pretty much all of mine are the same. I had, for brutality, 10 for all the same reasons. Premeditation, 10 for all the same reasons. Motive, 10 for all the same reasons. Difficulty of investigation, I gave her an 8. Because I do think that if the house hadn't caught fire, she would have continued for a long time.
Yeah.
And that was the only misstep.
That's fair.
That's
That's
definitely higher. But yeah, I think because she was a bit sloppy at times of, chasing the girl outside of the house with a whip, people seeing her like that, showing people the space, like things of that nature. Those are not necessarily great ways to get away with murder. She did get away with murder and a lot of it, but if you're looking at the, what not to do as a serial killer, those are two of the biggest ones. Don't let people see you and don't show people your work, which I know is a gross way to describe it, but that's how they see it.
Yep.
And then with body count, I gave it a 9. Just because there is the variable of we don't know how many there is. So just based off of the 57 that we assume are accounted for, I feel like a 9 is very justifiable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then anything else, obviously, like I always say on the other one, just one person's life is a 10. But if we're
absolutely.
But if we're looking at it on this scale, we can't always give people a 10 because there are some killers that we rank that are up into the 200 range documented.
Yeah.
And so we have to leave a little bit of wiggle room there for people who are heinously, just massacring people. But she is a monster. She was a walking monster. And I can only imagine what those walls had seen.
So she ranks a 9.53. That is the highest from One to Wicked we've ever had.
It is.
That is the highest from One to Wicked we've ever had.
And that feels accurate.
That's nuts.
Yeah, she deserves it. But yes, so thank y'all so much for listening to today's episode. We hope you enjoy. Go listen to something more lighthearted after this. But with that, though, my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.